precisely as the crucified one, is the word that does not pass away, and he is the one who stands at the door and knocks at the heart of every man, without restricting his freedom, but instead seeking to draw from this very freedom love, which is not only an act of solidarity with the suffering Son of Man, but also a kind of mercy shown by each one of us to the Son of the Eternal Father. In the whole of this messianic program of Christ, in the whole revelation of mercy through the cross, could man's dignity be more highly respected and ennobled? For in obtaining mercy, he is in a sense the one who at the same time shows mercy. In a word, is not this the position of Christ with regard to man when he says, "As you did it to one of the least of these, you did it to me"? Do not the words of the Sermon on the Mount, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy," constitute, in a certain sense, a synthesis of the whole of the good news, of the whole of the wonderful exchange, admirable commercium, contained therein? This exchange is a law of the very plan of salvation, a law which is simple, strong, and at the same time easy, demonstrating from the very start what the human heart is capable of, to be merciful. Do not these words from the Sermon on the Mount reveal in the same perspective the deep mystery of God, that inscrutable unity of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, in which love, containing justice, sets in motion mercy, which in its turn reveals the perfection of justice? The Paschal mystery is Christ at the summit of the revelation of the inscrutable mystery of God. It is precisely then that the words pronounced in the upper room are completely fulfilled. He who has seen me has seen the Father. In fact, Christ, whom the Father did not spare for the sake of man, and who in his passion and in the torment of the cross did not obtain human mercy, has revealed in his resurrection the fullness of the love that the Father has for him and in him for all people. He is not God of the dead, but of the living. In his resurrection, Christ has revealed the God of merciful love, precisely because he accepted the cross as the way to the resurrection. And it is for this reason that when we recall the cross of Christ, his passion and death, our faith and hope are centered on the risen one, on that Christ who, on the evening of that day, the first day of the week, stood among them in the upper room where the disciples were, breathed on them, and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven. If you retain the sins of any, they are retained." Here is the Son of God, who in his resurrection experienced in a radical way mercy shown to himself, that is to say, the love of the Father, which is more powerful than death. And it is also the same Christ, the Son of God, who at the end of his messianic mission, and in a certain sense, even beyond the end, reveals himself as the inexhaustible source of mercy, of the same love that, in a subsequent perspective of the history of salvation in the Church, is to be everlastingly confirmed as more powerful than sin. The Paschal Christ is the definitive incarnation of mercy, its living sign in salvation history and in eschatology. In the same spirit, the liturgy of Eastertide places on our lips the words of the psalm, Misercordias, Domini, in aeternum cantabo, Mother of Mercy. These words of the Church at Easter re-echo in the fullness of their prophetic content the words that Mary uttered during her visit to Elizabeth, the wife of Zechariah. His mercy is from generation to generation. At the very moment of the Incarnation, these words open up a new perspective of salvation history. After the resurrection of Christ, this perspective is new on both the historical and the eschatological level. From that time onwards, there is a succession of new generations of individuals in the immense human family in ever-increasing dimensions. There is also a succession of new generations of the people of God, marked with the sign of the cross and of the resurrection and sealed with the sign of the paschal mystery of Christ, the absolute revelation of the mercy that Mary proclaimed on the threshold of her kinswoman's house. His mercy is from generation to generation. Mary is also the one who obtained mercy in a particular and exceptional way, as no other person has. At the same time, still in an exceptional way, she made possible with the sacrifice of her heart her own sharing in revealing God's mercy. This sacrifice is intimately linked with the cross of her Son, at the foot of which she was to stand on Calvary. Her sacrifice is a unique sharing in the revelation of mercy, that is, a sharing in the absolute fidelity of God to his own love, to the covenant that he willed from eternity and that he entered into in time with man, with the people, with humanity. It is a sharing in that revelation that was definitively fulfilled through the cross. No one has experienced, to the same degree as the mother of the crucified one, the mystery of the cross, the overwhelming encounter of divine transcendent justice with love, that kiss given by mercy to justice. 104. No one has received into his heart as much as Mary did that mystery, that truly divine dimension of the redemption effected on Calvary by means of the death of the Son, together with the sacrifice of her maternal heart, together with her definitive fiat. Mary, then, is the one who has the deepest knowledge of the mystery of God's mercy. She knows its price. She knows how great it is. In this sense, we call her the Mother of Mercy, Our Lady of Mercy, or Mother of Divine Mercy. In each one of these titles, there is a deep theological meaning, for they express the special preparation of her soul, of her whole personality, so that she was able to perceive through the complex events, first of Israel, then of every individual and of the whole of humanity, that mercy of which, from generation to generation, people become sharers according to the eternal design of the most holy Trinity. The above titles, which we attribute to the Mother of God, speak of her principally, however, as the Mother of the Crucified and Risen One, as the one who, having obtained mercy in an exceptional way, in an equally exceptional way, merits that mercy throughout her earthly life, and particularly at the foot of the cross of her Son, and finally as the one who, through her hidden, and at the same time incomparable, sharing in the messianic mission of her Son, was called in a special way to bring close to people that love which he had come to reveal, the love that finds its most concrete expression vis-à-vis the suffering, the poor, those deprived of their own freedom, the blind, the oppressed, and sinners, just as Christ spoke of them in the words of the prophecy of Isaiah, first in the synagogue at Nazareth 106, and then in response to the question of the messengers of John the Baptist. It was precisely this merciful love which is manifested above all in contact with moral and physical evil, that the heart of her who was the Mother of the Crucified and Risen, one shared in singularly and exceptionally that Mary shared in. In her and through her, this love continues to be revealed in the history of the Church and of humanity. This revelation is especially fruitful because in the Mother of God it is based upon the unique tact of her maternal heart, on her particular sensitivity, on her particular fitness to reach all those who most easily accept the merciful love of a mother. This is one of the great life-giving mysteries of Christianity, a mystery intimately connected with the mystery of the Incarnation. The motherhood of Mary in the order of grace, as the Second Vatican Council explains, lasts without interruption from the consent which she faithfully gave at the Annunciation, and which she sustained without hesitation under the cross, until the eternal fulfillment of all the elect. In fact, being assumed into heaven, she has not laid aside this office of salvation, but by her manifold intercession, she continues to obtain for us the graces of eternal salvation. By her maternal charity, she takes care of the brethren of her Son who still journey on earth, surrounded by dangers and difficulties, until they are led into their blessed home. 6. Mercy, from generation to generation, an image of our generation. We have every right to believe that our generation, too, was included in the words of the Mother of God when she glorified that mercy shared in from generation to generation by those who allow themselves to be guided by the fear of God. The words of Mary's Magnificat have a prophetic content that concerns not only the past of Israel, but also the whole future of the people of God on earth. In fact, all of us now living on earth are the generation that is aware of the approach of the third millennium and that profoundly feels the change that is occurring in history. The present generation knows that it is in a privileged position. Progress provides it with countless possibilities that only a few decades ago were undreamed of. Man's creative activity, his intelligence, and his work have brought about profound changes both in the field of science and technology and in that of social and cultural life. Man has extended his power over nature and has acquired deeper knowledge of the laws of social behavior. He has seen the obstacles and distances between individuals and nations dissolve or shrink through an increased sense of what is universal, through a clearer awareness of the unity of the human race, through the acceptance of mutual dependence in authentic solidarity, and through the desire and possibility of making contact with one's brothers and sisters beyond artificial geographical divisions and national or racial limits. Today's young people, especially, know that the progress of science and technology can produce not only new material goods, but also a wider sharing in knowledge. The extraordinary progress made in the field of information and data processing, for instance, will increase man's creative capacity and provide access to the intellectual and cultural riches of other peoples. New communications techniques will encourage greater participation in events and a wider exchange of ideas. The achievements of biological, psychological, and social science will help man to understand better the riches of his own being. It is true that too often this progress is still the privilege of the industrialized countries, but it cannot be denied that the prospect of enabling every people and every country to benefit from it has long ceased to be a mere utopia when there is a real political desire for it. But side by side with all this, or rather as part of it, there are also the difficulties that appear whenever there is growth. There is unease and a sense of powerlessness regarding the profound response that man knows that he must give. The picture of the world today also contains shadows and imbalances that are not always merely superficial. The pastoral constitution, Gaudium et Spes of the Second Vatican Council, is certainly not the only document that deals with the life of this generation, but it is a document of particular importance. The dichotomy affecting the modern world, we read in it, is, in fact, a symptom of a deeper dichotomy that is in man himself. He is the meeting point of many conflicting forces. In his condition as a created being, he is subject to 1,000 shortcomings, but feels untrammeled in his inclinations and destined for a higher form of life. Torn by a welter of anxieties, he is compelled to choose between them and repudiate some among them. Worse still, feeble and sinful as he is, he often does the very thing he hates and does not do what he wants. And so he feels himself divided, and the result is a host of discords in social life. Towards the end of the introductory exposition, we read, "In the face of modern developments, there is a growing body of men who are asking the most fundamental of all questions, or are glimpsing them with a keener insight. What is man? What is the meaning of suffering, evil, death, which have not been eliminated by all this progress? What is the purpose of these achievements purchased at so high a price?" In the span of the 15 years since the end of the Second Vatican Council, has this picture of tensions and threats that mark our epoch become less disquieting? It seems not. On the contrary, the tensions and threats that in the Council document seem only to be outlined and not to manifest in depth all the dangers hidden within them, have revealed themselves more clearly in the space of these years. They have in a different way confirmed that danger, and do not permit us to cherish the illusions of the past, sources of uneasiness. Thus, in our world, the feeling of being under threat is increasing. There is an increase of that existential fear connected, especially, as I said in the encyclical Redemptor Homines, with the prospect of a conflict that, in view of today's atomic stockpiles, could mean the partial self-destruction of humanity. But the threat does not merely concern what human beings can do to human beings through the means provided by military technology. It also concerns many other dangers produced by a materialistic society which, in spite of humanistic declarations, accepts the primacy of things over persons. Contemporary man, therefore, fears that by the use of the means invented by this type of society, individuals and the environment, communities, societies and nations, can fall victim to the abuse of power by other individuals, environments, and societies. The history of our century offers many examples of this. In spite of all the declarations on the rights of man in his integral dimension, that is to say, in his bodily and spiritual existence, we cannot say that these examples belong only to the past. Man rightly fears falling victim to an oppression that will deprive him of his interior freedom, of the possibility of expressing the truth of which he is convinced, of the faith that he professes, of the ability to obey the voice of conscience that tells him the right path to follow. The technical means at the disposal of modern society conceal within themselves not only the possibility of self-destruction through military conflict, but also the possibility of a peaceful subjugation of individuals, of environments, of entire societies, and of nations that, for one reason or another, might prove inconvenient for those who possess the necessary means and are ready to use them without scruple. An instance is the continued existence of torture, systematically used by authority as a means of domination and political oppression, and practiced by subordinates with impunity. Together with awareness of the biological threat, therefore, there is a growing awareness of yet another threat, even more destructive of what is essentially human, what is intimately bound up with the dignity of the person and his or her right to truth and freedom. All this is happening against the background of the gigantic remorse caused by the fact that side by side with wealthy and surfeited people and societies living in plenty and ruled by consumerism and pleasure, the same human family contains individuals and groups that are suffering from hunger. There are babies dying of hunger under their mothers' eyes. In various parts of the world, in various socio-economic systems, there exist entire areas of poverty, shortage, and underdevelopment. This fact is universally known. The state of inequality between individuals and between nations not only still exists, it is increasing. It still happens that, side by side with those who are wealthy and living in plenty, there exist those who are living in want, suffering misery, and often actually dying of hunger. And their number reaches tens, even hundreds of millions. This is why moral uneasiness is destined to become even more acute. It is obvious that a fundamental defect, or rather series of defects, indeed a defective machinery, is at the root of contemporary economics and materialistic civilization, which does not allow the human family to break free from such radically unjust situations. This picture of today's world, in which there is so much evil, both physical and moral, so as to make of it a world entangled in contradictions and tensions, and at the same time full of threats to human freedom, conscience, and religion. This picture explains the uneasiness felt by contemporary man. This uneasiness is experienced not only by those who are disadvantaged or oppressed, but also by those who possess the privileges of wealth, progress, and power. And although there is no lack of people trying to understand the causes of this uneasiness, or trying to react against it with the temporary means offered by technology, wealth, or power, still in the very depth of the human spirit, this uneasiness is stronger than all temporary means. This uneasiness concerns, as the analyses of the Second Vatican Council rightly pointed out, the fundamental problems of all human existence. It is linked with the very sense of man's existence in the world, and is an uneasiness for the future of man and all humanity. It demands decisive solutions, which now seem to be forcing themselves upon the human race. Is justice enough? It is not difficult to see that in the modern world, the sense of justice has been reawakening on a vast scale. And without doubt, this emphasizes that which goes against justice in relationships between individual, social groups, and classes, between individual peoples and states, and finally between whole political systems, indeed, between what are called worlds. This deep and varied trend, at the basis of which the contemporary human conscience has placed justice, gives proof of the ethical character of the tensions and struggles pervading the world. The Church shares with the people of our time this profound and ardent desire for a life which is just in every aspect, nor does she fail to examine the various aspects of the sort of justice that the life of people and society demands. This is confirmed by the field of Catholic social doctrine, greatly developed in the course of the last century. On the lines of this teaching proceed the education and formation of human consciences in the spirit of justice, and also individual undertakings, especially in the sphere of the apostolate of the laity, which are developing in precisely this spirit. And yet it would be difficult not to notice that very often programs which start from the idea of justice and which ought to assist its fulfillment among individuals, groups, and human societies, in practice suffer from distortions. Although they continue to appeal to the idea of justice, nevertheless experience shows that other negative forces have gained the upper hand over justice, such as spite, hatred, and even cruelty. In such cases, the desire to annihilate the enemy, limit his freedom, or even force him into total dependence becomes the fundamental motive for action. And this contrasts with the essence of justice, which by its nature tends to establish equality and harmony between the parties in conflict. This kind of abuse of the idea of justice and the practical distortion of it show how far human action can deviate from justice itself, even when it is being undertaken in the name of justice. Not in vain did Christ challenge his listeners, faithful to the doctrine of the Old Testament, for their attitude which was manifested in the words, "An eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth." This was the form of distortion of justice at that time, and today's forms continued to be modeled on it. It is obvious, in fact, that in the name of an alleged justice, for example, historical justice or class justice, the neighbor is sometimes destroyed, killed, deprived of liberty, or stripped of fundamental human rights. The experience of the past and of our own time demonstrates that justice alone is not enough, that it can even lead to the negation and destruction of itself, if that deeper power, which is love, is not allowed to shape human life in its various dimensions. It has been precisely historical experience that, among other things, has led to the formulation of the saying, summum ius, summa iniuria. This statement does not detract from the value of justice and does not minimize the significance of the order that is based upon it. It only indicates, under another aspect, the need to draw from the powers of the Spirit which condition the very order of justice, powers which are still more profound. The Church, having before her eyes the picture of the generation to which we belong, shares the uneasiness of so many of the people of our time. Moreover, one cannot fail to be worried by the decline of many fundamental values, which constitute an unquestionable good not only for Christian morality, but simply for human morality, for moral culture. These values include respect for human life from the moment of conception, respect for marriage in its indissoluble unity, and respect for the stability of the family. Moral permissiveness strikes especially at this most sensitive sphere of life and society. Hand in hand with this go the crisis of truth in human relationships, lack of responsibility for what one says, the purely utilitarian relationship between individual and individual, the loss of a sense of the authentic common good, and the ease with which this good is alienated. Finally, there is the desacralization that often turns into dehumanization. The individual and the society for whom nothing is sacred suffer moral decay in spite of appearances. 7. The mercy of God in the mission of the Church. In connection with this picture of our generation, a picture which cannot fail to cause profound anxiety, there come to mind once more those words which, by reason of the incarnation of the Son of God, resounded in Mary's Magnificat, and which sing of mercy from generation to generation. The Church of our time, constantly pondering the eloquence of these inspired words and applying them to the sufferings of the great human family, must become more particularly and profoundly conscious of the need to bear witness in her whole mission to God's mercy, following in the footsteps of the tradition of the Old and the New Covenant, and above all of Jesus Christ himself and his apostles. The Church must bear witness to the mercy of God revealed in Christ in the whole of his mission as Messiah, professing it in the first place as a salvific truth of faith and as necessary for a life in harmony with faith, and then seeking to introduce it and to make it incarnate in the lives both of her faithful and, as far as possible, in the lives of all people of good will. Finally, the Church professing mercy and remaining always faithful to it has the right and the duty to call upon the mercy of God, imploring it in the face of all the manifestations of physical and moral evil, before all the threats that cloud the whole horizon of the life of humanity today. The Church professes the mercy of God and proclaims it.